Hi there, I'm Lorraine. And yes, my sister made me serve drinks at her wedding after stealing $250,000 and erasing me from our family business. I was listed as staff, not family. My name wasn't even on the guest list. But that was only the beginning. Why would someone you grew up with orchestrate your downfall, then smile while doing it? What would you have done if it were your sister? What time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. The paper wasn't folded like an invitation. It was creased like a receipt, one corner curled from moisture or maybe just neglect. No envelope, no embossed lettering, no hint of sentiment, just a printout. Staff schedule, bartending, vertical bar, Lorraine B. That was it. That was all I was worth now. The resort's employee entrance was around the back, past the loading dock and dumpsters. A side door buzzed open, and someone waved me in without eye contact. I could smell fried hors d'oeuvres and floor cleaner in the hallway. No one said my name. No one said welcome. Inside the main hall, it was all cream and gold. Crystal light fixtures dangled like icicles. Soft jazz trickled down from hidden speakers. I saw the champagne towers first, then the orchids, then her. Celeste stood at the far end of the room in a sleek satin robe, surrounded by her glow. A photographer circled her like a worshiper. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I was in a plain black skirt and a button-down shirt one size too big. My shoes weren't polished. My hair was pulled back tight because I hadn't had time or energy to do anything else. I was invisible. That was the goal, wasn't it? People arrived in waves, smelling like expensive perfumes and privilege. Some faces I recognized. Old family friends, a cousin I hadn't seen in years, a teacher from middle school who once praised my tenacity. Not one of them made eye contact. Maybe they didn't know who I was. Maybe they pretended not to. Someone handed me a clipboard, a man I didn't know. He pointed at the bar setup. "You're on signature cocktails and champagne. Stay up front, bride's request." Of course it was. A voicemail from Celeste had come 2 weeks ago. "We'd love to have you, in some capacity," she'd said. Not an invitation, an assignment, a role. I was cast as background. No lines, no spotlight, but plenty of work. I moved toward the bar. My apron was already stained before the first guest even sipped. As I reached for a bottle of sparkling wine, a younger server paused beside me. He frowned. "They made you wear that?" I blinked. "What?" He nodded toward my outfit. "Yours is different. Looks tailored?" I glanced down. The black fabric was too stiff, the collar too high. The other bartenders wore standard polos. Mine looked like something from an outdated funeral home. I looked across the room again. Celeste caught my eye, then smirked. It wasn't logistics, it was theater. Someone passed by behind me and whispered just loud enough, "Isn't that her sister? The one who, disappeared?" My grip on the wine bottle tightened. I didn't spill, I didn't speak, but I didn't look away either. They wanted a ghost. I wasn't going to give them one. I wiped the condensation off a champagne flute and stared through it, the warped light dancing like lies over linen. It was almost poetic, the way the glass distorted everything, just like she had. 16 months ago, I'd sat across from my father in his office. Same tonewood desk, same etched nameplate. I had charts, logs, transfer histories printed and clipped with precision. I wasn't making an accusation then. I just wanted clarity. "There's a missing $250,000 in the escrow tracking," I said, tapping the top sheet. He didn't look up. "Are you suggesting someone stole it?" "No," I answered, already knowing. "I'm saying the report doesn't match the ledger, and the only name attached to the transaction is mine." That got his attention. Barely. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across like it was an invoice instead of an execution. It was an internal memo, on company letterhead signed by me, or someone trying hard to look like me. Request for reallocation of funds, marked urgent, board approval waived. "I didn't write this," I whispered. He didn't say "I know." He didn't say "let's fix this." He just exhaled like I'd disappointed him again. "Celeste said you were covering some debts. We all make mistakes." That was the day something inside me cracked, not because he believed her, but because he wanted to. There was no press release, no confrontation. I was quietly removed from the firm. The narrative? I stepped down for personal reasons. I didn't argue, I didn't sue. I let the silence bury me. Back in the present, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Tamrin. Check this. The attachment loaded slowly. A PDF, banking screenshots, internal transfers routing from our family firm to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Account holder? Kenton Hall. My chest tightened so sharply I almost dropped the bottle in my hand. It wasn't just Celeste. It wasn't just ambition. It was theft, orchestrated and clean. I looked across the room. Kenton stood by the cake table, laughing with a guest, his hand at the small of Celeste's back like he owned her. Or she owned him, maybe both. They hadn't just taken money, they'd taken trust, not just my father's, mine. My phone buzzed again. You're not crazy, I should have helped you back then, Tamrin wrote. I slid the phone back into my pocket and stared at Kenton through the shimmer of crystal and chaos. His laugh felt like glass breaking, and I knew I wasn't going to leave this story unfinished. 2 weeks before the wedding, I found the paper shoved beneath my apartment door. It wasn't an envelope, no cursive font, no family seal or affectionate note, just a printout. Schedule, bartending. Time, 4 p.m. sharp. Name, Lorraine B. It was so matter-of-fact, it took a moment to sting. Now, 2 hours before the ceremony, I stood in the corridor near the banquet hall. My shift hadn't started, but I was early, watching, listening. A catering manager barked orders to a young staffer beside the front desk. Double-check the list. VIP passes, access tags, and the exclusions. My stomach tightened. I edged closer, pretending to wipe down glassware. The clipboard between them held dozens of names, color-coded. My name wasn't on the guest side. It was under a tab labeled Logistics. One line was bolded in red. Lorraine. No last name, no title, no role. Just a note beneath it. Do not admit to main ballroom, bridal suite, or photo areas. I didn't blink, didn't gasp. But I felt the same burn I remembered from high school, when I showed up to a cousin's birthday and Celeste whispered to the host that I was just here for cleanup. 16 years ago, she looked me in the eye and said, "Don't take it personally. You blend into the background. That's your gift." Back then, I believed her. Now, I watched Hugo, the younger staffer, glance toward me, then back to the clipboard. Our eyes met. "Hey," he said, approaching awkwardly. "Look, I know it's not my place, but I figured you should see this." He handed me the list. I read it, every word, twice. "I'm not surprised," I said, handing it back. "But, thank you." Hugo hesitated. "They said not to tell your father you're working here." I stared at him. "Wait, what?" He pointed. Another line, next to Edward Betancourt's name. "Do not let him know Lorraine is present in any service role." It wasn't just exclusion, it was calculated. I folded the list neatly and slid it into my apron. Back at the bar, I poured rosé like I was sculpting marble. Every motion controlled, every thought sharpened. They didn't want me seen, so I'd make sure they couldn't look away. I slipped into the hallway again later, took a photo of the clipboard on my phone, and zoomed in on the note. They weren't just trying to erase me from the ceremony. They were trying to erase me from memory. The room was polished within an inch of its life. Golden candlesticks, curated playlists humming overhead, waitstaff floating between tables like shadows, everything choreographed, controlled. I moved like muscle memory. Serve, smile, disappear. Celeste's table was the center of it all, of course. Draped in orchids, surrounded by influencers and business partners she called chosen family. I was assigned to her specifically. Shadow serve, they'd called it. I didn't flinch. Not even when Kenton laughed so hard his drink spilled. Not even when Celeste snapped her fingers for more lemon water, not looking up. Then came the toast. She clinked her glass with perfect drama and rose to her feet. "I just want to say thank you," she said, swaying slightly in the spotlight. "To everyone who made this day so perfect, and to my team, especially my sister Lorraine, for reminding us that no matter how far you fall, you can still serve with grace." A beat of silence, then laughter, sharp, collective, knowing. My hand tightened around the champagne bottle. Kenton lifted his glass. "To family," I nodded. Once. Mechanical. Inside, something split. Later that night, a flash drive appeared on the back counter. No note, just plastic and metal waiting. I played it on my phone in the supply closet, wedged between kegs and crates. The footage was raw. Behind the scenes, Celeste adjusting her hair, Kenton whispering something in her ear, her smirk widening. "She still thinks this is about closure," Celeste said, laughing. "She was born to play servant." They laughed like it was the most natural sound in the world. I watched the video twice, didn't cry, didn't even blink. I just sat there, the air around me thinning like old paint peeling off a lie. They wanted me quiet, decorative, controlled. I stared at my reflection in the stainless steel fridge. "They wanted a silent witness," I said softly. "What they'll get is something louder." I copied the video to my phone, saved it twice, labeled it, "Play if provoked." Then I walked back into the room. Celeste was sipping a late-night mimosa, already halfway tipsy, laughing at something Kenton whispered again. I poured her another glass. No eye contact, no smile. Let them toast. Tomorrow they'd choke. A staff member knocked on the break room door and said I had a family delivery. I thought maybe it was a sick joke, a bouquet from Celeste, or another task disguised as sentiment. But when I stepped into the hallway, it was my father. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. The last time I saw him, he was seated behind a boardroom table, his silence cutting deeper than anything my sister could have said. Now, he stood holding a leather folder like it weighed more than it should. "I need to speak with you," he said. No warmth, just formality, like we were negotiating a contract neither of us wanted. We sat in a side room near the back of the resort. It smelled like citrus polish and the faint musk of someone else's argument still clinging to the walls. I didn't speak first. I wanted to see if he'd choke on the silence like I had. "I owe you an explanation," he said finally. "About what happened. The firm, the money, the will." I folded my arms. "I already know what happened." He looked down. "It was easier to believe her, your sister. She made it simple. You didn't fight it." "I didn't know I was allowed to," I said. "You think silence means guilt, but sometimes it just means exhaustion." He nodded slowly. "I told myself I was protecting peace, but peace doesn't come from pretending." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He pulled the folder onto the table between us. Inside, legal pages stamped and dated, notarized, real. "This is the original will," he said. "The one I signed before the heart surgery, the only one legally binding." "And the one that names me?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Celeste brought me a draft after I got home, said it was cleaner, that you'd stepped away anyway. I don't think I even read it." "You didn't just hand her my seat," I said quietly. "You erased my name." He flinched. "If you want to reclaim it, you can." I looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. "You don't get to make this right," I said. "But I will." Then I stood. My legs were steady, my voice didn't crack. I walked out with the folder tucked beneath my arm like a weapon I hadn't yet chosen how to use. In the hallway, I heard laughter echoing through the ballroom. Celeste, rehearsing her vows. Her voice was bright, the same tone she'd use when telling waiters the soup was too cold or a dress was too tight. She played the long game, I thought, but she forgot I was still on the board. The text came while I was slicing lemons behind the bar. No name, no warning, just a file transfer marked, "For you, finally." My hand stopped moving. I stepped into the back office, locked the door, and opened it. Tamron's note was brief. "I should have done this years ago. I was scared. You shouldn't have paid the price." The folder inside the download wasn't dramatic. No red flags or bold letters, just emails, call transcripts, image attachments. Collected like receipts, cold and factual. There was one quote that landed like a knife. "Lorraine can't stop what she can't prove." Celeste had said that in a recorded strategy session. Her voice calm, amused, talking about me like I was a speed bump on her way to the crown. The emails that followed were between her and Tamron. Coordination, narrative control, PR talking points. My name became a liability. My silence was a marketing angle. I sat in the chair and didn't breathe for a while. The air was too still, too clean for what I was holding. 16 months ago, I'd believed silence protected dignity. Now I saw what it had bought her. Headlines, followers, admiration, all on my back. Another file opened, this one titled Tamron Testimony, a document explaining how Celeste had threatened her with a lawsuit if she spoke, how she'd signed an NDA written by Kenton's firm, under pressure, with no time to review. I was a coward, Tamron had typed at the bottom. This is me not being one anymore. I printed 3 copies. One went in my purse, one in the bar's locked cabinet, and one I slipped inside a catering cart destined for the bridal suite, beneath layers of napkins. She built this house of lies. I would light the match. Before I left the office, I opened my phone and composed a message to Celeste's assistant. 3 words. Check your inbox. Then I shut off my phone. No more silence, and no more sisters either. The room was quiet, overly chilled, the kind of cold that settles in corporate spaces, clinical and timeless. I had reserved it under my father's name. It was supposed to be a logistics debrief for the wedding, but the only thing being unwrapped today was truth. Mr. Caldwell arrived 15 minutes late, flustered, adjusting his tie as if the fabric itself could hide discomfort. I didn't offer coffee. Instead, I opened my folder and slid 2 sets of documents across the table. I'd like these verified against the one filed with the estate, I said. He hesitated, then nodded. His eyes didn't meet mine. That was my first confirmation. While he flipped through the pages, I studied the way his fingers trembled slightly. The original will was dated and notarized before my father's heart surgery. My name listed clearly, equal distribution, transparent, legal. The version Celeste had orchestrated was sloppier. No notary, the signature alignment off, the timestamp conveniently after my father had been sedated. I remember signing something, my father had said, but not that. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. This appears altered. Say forged, I replied. He didn't. Would you like to explain how this passed through your office? His mouth opened, then shut. Celeste said you were fine with the change, he murmured, that you were stepping away. Did she also tell you I lost my job, my name, my home? He looked down. The silence grew roots. I stood. You helped her erase me. He didn't deny it, didn't ask for forgiveness. But when I stepped into the hallway after that meeting, I didn't feel shaken. I felt sharp, focused. Back in my room, I laid out both wills side by side. I stared at my name, present on one, deleted from the other. They always said blood was thicker than water, but poison's thicker than both. I sealed a copy in an envelope. On the front, Estate Board Confidential. It was scheduled for delivery Monday morning. I sat at my laptop, opened a blank email and typed, subject, fraudulent will, immediate review requested. Then I saved it, not yet. Let her stand at the altar surrounded by everything she stole. Let them all look, before it's taken away. The ballroom shimmered with golden light as the ceremony began. Veil swept air, hushed laughter, crystal chandeliers dripping elegance like honey. Guests turned their heads toward the aisle with synchronized awe. Celeste, glowing in her white perfection, walked slowly toward the altar. Her train swept the floor like she was claiming ground. Behind the bar, I stood still, hand in my apron pocket. My fingers brushed over the USB drive. The folded printouts pressed flat against my palm, warm from the heat of my skin. My heart was not racing. It had already passed panic. What was left was calculation. If anyone here knows why these two should not be joined in marriage, the officiant said, speak now. I stepped out from behind the bar, quietly. No dramatics, just purpose. I do. Heads turned, a few gasps. Kenton's face twitched. Celeste didn't move. I pulled my phone from my apron, opened the audio file, hit play. Celeste's voice filled the room, sharp and unmistakable. She still thinks this is about closure. She was born to play servant. Then Kenton's low chuckle. I lifted the papers from my hand, walked them over to the wedding planner. She hesitated, then took them. Within seconds, the welcome screen behind the altar flickered. The screenshots appeared one by one. Emails from Celeste, internal strategy notes, banking transfers. The room fell into an echoing silence. Kenton took a step back. Celeste finally turned. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You forged the documents," Kenton said. "You told me it was handled." He walked over to the best man, pulled a sealed envelope from his jacket, and handed it over. Later, I'd learned that Kenton had filed a civil suit hours before the ceremony. Allegations of misappropriated funds, fraud, damage control in tailored suits. But that wasn't the most satisfying part. That night, in my suite, Tamron sat across from me, her hair pulled into a tired knot. She told me the truth. Kenton was already under federal investigation. SEC flagged him 6 months ago. This was him trying to look clean. I nodded. One more illusion gone, one more mask dissolved. I didn't feel triumphant, just emptied out. After Tamron left, I walked back into the ballroom. Most of the guests were gone. The flowers were still fresh, untouched. I poured myself a glass of champagne. The silence stretched around me like smoke. I raised the glass. "To the empire of lies," I said softly. "Burn quietly." Then I took a sip and deleted the last video from my phone. I didn't win. I reclaimed. The ballroom didn't sparkle anymore. The linens were wrinkled, wine-stained. A single heel sat abandoned beneath a table like it had fled the scene mid-lie. Bouquets sagged in their vases, petals drooping like they knew. I walked through it all barefoot. My shoes had blistered me the night before, but the cold marble now felt oddly grounding. This was where she'd built her perfect empire, and this was what remained. Tamron met me in the lobby before sunrise. She didn't say a word, just handed me coffee and sat beside me while we watched the staff tear down everything Celeste had constructed, one orchid centerpiece at a time. Celeste vanished from social media hours after the video dropped. Her final post, offline for healing. No apology, no admission, just the curated spin she'd mastered. But the comments were brutal. Sponsors pulled back. Even the wellness brand quietly removed her from their website. Kenton's lawyers filed a formal separation of assets and a public civil suit. Turns out, his offshore accounts had been flagged months ago. He didn't flip to save me, he flipped to save himself. The SEC would take care of the rest. Edward resigned from the family board. I didn't attend the meeting. He sent me a letter afterward. I failed both my daughters, one by neglect, the other by enabling. I didn't write back. They offered me the company, a full seat at the table, restitution. I declined. Instead, Tamron and I registered Reclaim, a nonprofit for women ousted by family and legacy. We launched with no fanfare, just a website, a mission, and the kind of fire that doesn't ask permission to burn. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth, and then space from it. I visited my mother's grave in the middle of the week, alone. The sun was high, the Arizona air dry enough to crack skin. I knelt beside her headstone and left a letter, sealed in plastic. You let her do this, but I survived. I didn't cry, but I lingered. I didn't forgive, but I moved on. That night I sat outside a quiet cafe, the desert wind soft against my face. I opened my phone, typed a message. If you ever want to talk, not to fix it, but just to face it, I'll listen. I didn't sign it, I didn't send it. Not yet. But it sat there, drafted, waiting, just like I had. Sometimes the loudest betrayals don't come from strangers. They come from the people who once said they loved you the most. And sometimes, healing doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. It means choosing yourself, even when no one else will. If you've ever felt erased, silenced, or made to shrink just to keep someone else comfortable, this story is for you. Not as a warning, but as a reminder. You are allowed to reclaim your voice. You are allowed to walk away from the table and build your own. What would you have done in Lorraine's place? Would you have stayed silent or stood up? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if it didn't, tell me why. I'm listening. If you enjoyed this video, felt seen, or simply believe stories like this matter, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. There's more truth ahead and more voices ready to be heard.